Welcome back to the Patriots Report. My name is Christopher Price of the Boston Globe, joined as always by my podcast partner, former Patriots wide receiver Chris Hogan. We have a guest today, very important guest, Chris, a guy that I think you know pretty well, former Patriots offensive line coach Dante Scarnecchia. Dante, I don't want to waste too much of your time here, but want to welcome you to the Patriots Report and kind of jump into the fact that the Patriots, after 1 year, have hired a new coach in Mike Vrabel. I know that you have a history with Mike. You were the offensive line coach when obviously Mike was there as a linebacker. And so I just kind of curious to get your take on him as a guy who performed well as a player and has had put together a pretty impressive resume so far as a coach.
I have a long history with Mike. My first interaction with him, he was a substitute defensive end outside linebacker at Pittsburgh. We went over there to play him. Really had him beat. We were, had the ball in our last possession, and he came off the edge as a sub pass rusher and strip sacked Bledsoe, and we lost the game. And then the next year, Mike was on our team, and that was a great thing because I knew we were getting a good football player, and he certainly was. And really have a lot of respect for him as a player. Really have a lot of respect for him as a coach because we interacted with both the Texans and the Titans on training camp practices, and I watched Mike coach, and every bit excellent coach as he was an excellent player.
I mean, I'm curious, Dante, because you've had a lot of past experience with him. We've seen time and time again that past coaches go to different places and they try to implement let's just call it, for better choice of words, the Bill Belichick way of coaching. And you obviously played for, coach with Bill for a long period of time. What's going to be different with Mike, you think, coming into New England, place that he's played? He's got a lot of history. Like, how do you see him kind of getting these guys, and what type of culture is he going to try to develop here in New England and get it back on track?
Well, that word culture is really a broad term, but I think this, Mike coached, was a head coach long enough to establish the values and the way that he wants to build a team, pretty much obviously, given his past as a player and the different coaches he's worked for. So whatever he arrived at as a head coach at Tennessee, I think that's what that's the culture he'll bring in here. Certainly there's going to be pieces of what you all did, as far as players in the locker room and the culture those teams cultivated within the organization. And I'm certain that, part of that will be implemented here with Mike, but, he's his own guy, his own man, and he knows what he wants. He knows how he wants practices done. Whether they're the same as, as that we had when we were all together here, I don't know, but I do know that he'll be a big part of it. And he's around all the position groups. He takes an active role in everything that's going on there, and his voice clearly is heard, and the style of play that he wants them to have will be not unlike, the style of play that he always showed as a player. And, we've all seen it and was pretty exceptional.
Dante, I know there was a report out there that said that you were going to be kind of consulting on a part-time basis. You went on with WEEI probably a week or so ago, and you said that's really not happening. So I'm curious about what you think of the Patriots' new offensive line coach, Doug Marrone. Have you had a chance to work with him in the past, and what are some of your thoughts about him as a teacher and a coach?
I've known Doug a long time because our son Steve worked for him at Syracuse. He was in video and then ultimately became the assistant to the head coach at Syracuse. So I've known Doug a long time, and and also I've coached against him in the league. I have a huge respect for him as a coach. Uh, I know he's a good football coach. He's a good line coach, and I think they have a good, guy that's going to go in there and develop the talent that they have, and hopefully they'll add some players to it. And and try to make the position better. But you know, I'm not I'm not involved over there in any way. I don't go over to the office. I haven't been in the facility much over the last 5 years. So, I'm pretty content to let things just go the way they are and, watch on TV and see how they do and see how well things, see how well they can develop that football team and make it better.
You sure Josh is not going to be able to pull you out of retirement and get some of these bring some old juju back into the facility next year?
Now, I'm absolutely sure of that, Chris, because I don't want to. I coached football for 48 years and
Oh, I
loved
know.
every minute of it. And so, and I did. I loved every minute of it. It's a hard life, and you give up a lot of things in that life. And right now, I'm full-time participant in this home, and believe me, this is not my castle. I'm just a lowly servant in this house because there's only one queen in this castle who happens to be the king too. So I'm content with that. We got two grandkids that are 16 and 14 that live with us half the time and busy doing all things with them. And, I got a lot on my plate right now and I'm enjoying it all.
Well, Dante, you've certainly earned that, man. But talking about Josh, I thought when when they were moving on head coaches and talking about offensive coordinators, I know Josh was still in the area. To me, Josh, and you've been around him for so long too. I mean, he's such a great teacher, and I think he's going to be such a useful tool for the young kid that they have at quarterback there. And I think Drake is going to be in really good hands with Josh. And I've read a ton of different stuff, and his football IQ is going to go through the roof. And I know that you can speak on that a little bit. I mean, I've said it countless times about how much football knowledge I learned in my 3 years in New England with, whether it was Josh or you or Chad or Bill. I mean, you guys do such a great job of preparing the players and your preparation. I'm excited for Drake to learn from Josh. I think it's going to be really good for his career.
Well, I couldn't agree any more with you, Chris. The thing about it is the system that was implemented by Charlie when we all got together and whatever it was, 99, and that system grew as it transcended from Charlie to Josh and then Billy O and then back to Josh. And, we all shared, and whatever that became, we all shared it. And more importantly, you guys embraced it all. Throughout the years, the players looked at the system, embraced the system, and, there was so much consistency within that system for a long period of time. And the thing I always go back to is, everyone says, once Tom left and all that, things have started to go downhill. When Mac Jones came in here as a rookie, the one thing that I always just marveled at as I would watch the games on TV from home, and you always saw the same thing when Mac came off the field and was on the bench. You saw one thing, and that was Josh sitting right next to him, going over every play that was run in the previous series, and he did it through the entirety of every game and the entirety of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised if you saw much of the same thing this year, because that's his DNA. That's what he does. He's a teacher. There's no detail that will go unnoticed and improved upon. And I think that I'd be shocked if it wasn't the same way for Drake May and for his development going forward. Yeah, he's going to have to learn a new system, but by all accounts, the guy did outstanding this year, learning a new system and then getting in there and applying it as a player, over the last 8 games of the season, and he did really well. I mean, well enough for everybody to really have a lot of high expectations going forward. So I'm really happy for Josh. He gets to stay here. He gets to do the things that he really does best, and that's coordinate an offense and get the most out of all the players at all positions, that are in that offensive system.
Dante, what would things be like for you at this time of year if you were still coaching? I know we talked once about how Bill would have you flying all over the country, over these next couple of months. But walk me through what you would do as part of the pre-draft process when it came to looking at guys, evaluating guys, and if you have any fun road stories, feel free to toss those in as well.
Well, as far as you start in with the evaluation. There's, what you're talking about, 150 guys that, that maybe have enough ability to play in the NFL or not. And so I thought the best thing that we did was they would give me a list of about 40 guys, and most of the guys that were going to the combine, and I would watch tape on all of those guys. And then they would, after the combine, scale it down, and they'd say, hey, go work out these, 15 to 20 guys, no more than 20, probably no less than 13. And that would be guys all over the country. And, I would go and I would individually work these guys out at either their pro day or at a private workout, and try to get to know the players, see what their intellectual abilities were relative to football and as a person. And the way I used to do that was I would teach them our empty protection system and say, hey, and I would teach them it verbatim, just like I would if we had signed them and they were in the meeting room and I was teaching them the system. And then I'd erase the board and I'd put up a formation and say, all right, what's the name of this formation? And ask them, an hour's worth of questions on all these things, because you really wanted to find out what type of intellectual aptitude these guys would have, how much they could recall or not. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. So, and then get them on the field and see how well they did in workouts. Did they meet the criterion that we had? And I valued three things relative to, evaluating a football player. Are they smart enough? Okay, they don't have to be geniuses, but they have to be smart enough to understand the system. All right, are they athletic enough to play the positions that you want them to play? And the third and most important thing is, as the first two I said, enough, smart enough and athletic enough. The last thing is tough, and there's no enough on that one. Okay, there's no border. They just got to be tough guys. If they're not tough guys, they really have a hard time playing in the league. So I just say, smart, tough, or very tough and athletic enough to play the positions, and those are the traits that we look for. And then, you asked a question about a road story. So Bill brought me into his office before one of these trips of his, and he'd say, hey, look, I want you to go down to Auburn and work this guy out there. Okay, Bill, no problem. And he says, well, you're at Auburn. Go down to Florida and work that guy out over there, And I'm thinking, all right, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, all right, no problem. Then he goes, and while you're down in Florida at the University of Florida, I want you to go over to Fresno State and work that guy out there. And I'm thinking, Bill. And I said, Bill, Fresno State's out in California. Yeah, I know. He says, well, and while you're in Fresno, why don't you go over to Boise State and work that guy? Now I'm going all the way to the Southeast, all the way to the West Coast, and now up in the Boise, Idaho. And before he could go any further, I just left the room. I had to get out of there because there's no telling where I was going to go after that. But, that's just part of the job in the spring. And the whole emphasis on all of that is to look at the players that you really have an interest in and try to come out with the best information possible on those players so that you don't make any mistakes in the draft. But look, we've all made mistakes, and yet we've also found guys that could come in and play in our system and do a good job for us.
Was there ever a guy specific to the draft that you really banged the table for in, I guess, draft parlance? After getting a chance to watch him, after getting a chance to work him out and talk to him and kind of, run him through the whiteboard, that you guys didn't take, that you said, you kind of look at him as maybe the one who got away?
I think this, when you first asked that question, my thought went this way. I never banged the table on anyone, but I think the one quality, a coach who for a short period of time becomes a scout evaluating players, or a scout over a long period of time, I think the greatest quality that they can have is to look at players and say, no, we don't want that guy. Or in some cases, and this really gets hard, hey, coach, I'd really like to see this guy on our football team. Okay. Fortunately for us, unilaterally, most of the guys we brought in, we thought, okay, these are guys we really want on our football team because they had the kind of traits that I've already just talked about: tough, smart, and athletic enough. So, and as Bill got to know me as an evaluator of players, and I'm not speaking for any other coaches or any scouts, as he got to know me, there became, I would hope, a trust level that said, hey, I know how this guy evaluates. I know what he covets. I know he's looking for these traits. Coincidentally, those things fit our system, and these are the types of guys we want to have around here. And that's basically the way it worked over a long period of time, and I'm grateful for all of it.
Chris and I were talking about this last week, kind of about how some of the current players on the roster are going to be able to fit into. We talk about the offense a lot, and we obviously talk about the receivers a ton. And it's not really a question, but my advice to all these young guys and learning Josh's offense, being a guy that came in and had to learn it, was do the work, right? Study, know every single position, be able to be, what Bill used to say to us, if you're not good at one thing, be good at multiple things. And, I remember my time in New England, it was all about being able to be put in every single one of those positions. And that's always my advice. But I love the smart, athletic, tough analogy. I think to me, that's kind of seems like what Vrabel's looking for, man. I mean, he's looking for smart, tough football players that are going to compete. You heard him; he talked about it, that it's one of the greatest compliments that he get from another coach or scout or whatever after a game. He'd be like, doesn't matter win, loss, or tie, but you got a tough football team. And I think that's kind of what he's after, which is, I think, what New England fans, what this team needs is a coach that is just going to put a tough football team on the field every single Sunday. So, man, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what this team is going to be capable of in this year, and what he's going to be able to, the players that he's going to bring in. And I'm excited, man. I wish these guys nothing but the best this year. I think it's going to be a fun team to watch.
I think you're right. We all hope for the best. There's no doubt about that. We're in an interesting time, and I like the time that we're in. I'm not one of those guys that looks back to the past and say, well, they're not going to be tough unless you slam them together about 1,000 times every practice. Those times are over, man. That CTE stuff, it's true. Okay. And the way the game has been structured and the amount of times you can wear pads at practice, 13 times during the entire football season, you can be in pads, and only one time each week. I don't have a problem with that. And I think it's a good thing. But I also think you got to teach the game, and you have to structure your practices so that they demand a lot of the players mentally, maybe not so much physically, but certainly you're building up a high degree of endurance and mental toughness, because you're asked to do things over and over and over again, whether they're against bags, which is pretty much what everybody's doing now, or practices where you're not just slamming everyone together. So I think that that's the challenge that all teams are faced with now. But you know what? They're overcoming it. When you see a guy like Saquon Barkley rush for 2,000 yards in one season behind a line of these really, really good players that have been really well coached. It just says, hey, look, it can be done, and we got to find the ways to get it done, whether it's in organized team activities or mini camp or those off-season programs, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all that stuff. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to do it as hard as you can do it within the structure without just running guys in the walls all the time. And I think that it's a great challenge that everyone's faced with across the league. That's the good thing about it. Everyone's got to play by those rules, and then you try to get the most out of them that you possibly can. So, yeah, I think it is exciting, and I think that Mike has he's a smart guy, and he has a system in place that I'm sure he's going to use to try to get the most out of the players he has.
Dante, you brought up Saquon Barkley, and I'm curious to find out what you think about the Philadelphia offensive line. Obviously, it is, they enjoyed great success over the course of the year, of course, the last few years. What is it about that group, other than their size and speed, maybe that the Patriots can look at and take some lessons from their approach to offensive line play and apply them to the current roster moving forward?
Well, I don't think it. They have 5 really good players, but they've invested, some high draft choices in those players as well. So, and they hit on some guys like the left tackle, Mailata. I mean, there, was he a 6th-round draft choice from New Zealand or Australia or somewhere? And whatever. But, I know that the offensive line coach went in there and said, hey, I really want this guy on the team because of these reasons. And they said, all right, we're taking him. All right. And they did. And it's paid huge dividends in that respect. So, you gotta look and see at all the positions on the football team right now. And I know they're doing that. And so, all right, how do we improve these positions? What's the best way for us to go? And so, it's funny when you listen to talk radio, and I listen to it just like everyone. And they say, well, we got the 4th guy in this draft. Let's go out and get an offensive tackle. And I'm going to tell you something. If there's a guy there that you really, really want who coincidentally happens to be an offensive tackle, and you say, all right, that's a good need, we'll fit it, well, that's fine. But me personally, I'm kind of an old school guy. I've heard the saying that if I'm taking a guy in the 4th with the 4th guy in the draft, I'm taking a guy who can sack the quarterback or score touchdowns. And I think I would take a guy that can do those things over an offensive lineman. Now, I'm not saying, don't take one, but I'm saying that, there's a lot of good football players out there, and not all those guys at Philadelphia I don't think any of them were taken in the top 20 picks, maybe, just a little after that. So wherever you value those guys, you put them in those slots and you try to get them in those slots. And then it all comes down to, when it's all said and done, you get your guys and you have your team and you build your team. But more importantly, you develop your team. You develop every player at every position. And if you do that, your team's going to be better. And Chris can attest to this. What did we do during training camp, Chris, after every practice was over? What happened after that practice?
Watch the film?
Nope. We had a 12-play opportunity period for all those players on the back end.
Right. We talked about that. Yeah. The competition period.
Exactly. And the whole idea for them was to get as many reps as the guys that had reps during the practice. And if you do that, you're giving everyone a fair look to prove that they can be on your team. And more importantly, that you can develop the whole team and every individual on it. And if you do that, you will come up with, all right, I have to be selfish here and talk about guys that we had in the offensive line: Steve Neal, Russ Hochstein, Tom Ashworth, all those guys, and Brandon Gordon, they were all free agents. And you know what else? They all started in Super Bowls. So it's all about developing your roster.
Yeah. I mean, I got nothing else for you, Chris. I mean, that
Dante,
I think it's interesting. You know, like we talk about all that stuff, and we talk about bringing in players who are going to draft, who are going to bring in. It's all smoke and mirrors to me because at the end of the day, players got to buy into what we're doing here in New England as well. You know, if you bring a guy in, he just doesn't have the want to or the will to be a part of a team and be a part of an organization and help do whatever it takes to win football games, then to me that's a wasted free agent or draft pick because it can sell some tickets, but if it doesn't help you win football games, it doesn't mesh with everyone on the team, it doesn't really make a difference. I talk about the teams that we had, while I was there, Dante, all the time, and I always bring it up. It's like that was easily the best locker room that I had been a part of in my entire career, solely based on the fact that we all got along, but we also every single person up and down the line, whether you're a starter or a third, fourth string, or just special teamer. It didn't matter if you were asked to do something on the football field just to help the team win a football game. There was no second guessing it, and that's the type of player that I'm interested in bringing into this program and this organization. And I think that's what's going to get this team back to playing good football again.
Yeah, what's what you guys talked about at the very beginning, culture, and I know I'm certain that culture is very important to Mike and and I'm certain it's important to the guys he's brought in on the staff.
Dante, I'm curious, over the course of your coaching career, do you have a favorite all-time offensive lineman? A guy that you just go back to time and again and say, maybe not the best technically, physically, but maybe a guy who made a big leap over the course of his career. I'm thinking maybe initially of a Stephen Neal type, or a guy who played multiple positions while, maybe while he's injured, a guy like Logan Mankins, or, a guy who did it over an extended period of time, Matt Light, Nate Solder. Do you have a favorite guy or maybe favorite guys that you coached while you were with the Patriots?
You know, I'm probably like a lot of coaches. Yeah, you do have some guys that you really said, boy, that guy's really a good player. And I really, I was so fortunate because we had a lot of guys that were really good people, really hard workers. And to Chris's point that he brought up, in talking about culture, the culture in the locker room was really important to the entire team, as is the culture in each individual meeting room. If everyone that goes into those meetings really embraces what's being said and really believes in what's being taught and really takes it to the field and then applies it, then you really have a chance to be successful. And if it goes south the other way, then you don't. And I've coached a lot of really good players, and you mentioned a lot of the names, and I always kind of really shy away from that, Chris, because to name one, to name five is to leave another 70 out. And I have a hard time doing that. I have special memories of guys that, when asked to get into certain situations and really come through. And I'll give you one example. We were getting ready to play Baltimore down in Baltimore, and we were just decimated at tackle. And so Logan had to go out and play left tackle against Terrell Suggs for them. And, Logan was a left tackle at Fresno, but he certainly wasn't a left tackle when we drafted him. We just moved him to guard. And, he went out, he practiced all week and studied every bit of tape he could take and there he could study, and went out there and played a hell of a game against a really great football player at left tackle. We went down there and beat him. And, that was a special memory that I'll always cherish. But if there's one, I could name 50 memories like that, because we just had a lot of guys that, stepped up when it was tough. And because that's the kind of culture that we had.
Dante, thank you so much for taking the time to do this for several reasons, not the least of which you got a birthday coming up.
How'd you know that?
That's everybody knows that. You're Dante Scarnecchia.
Yeah,
Chris,
right.
Chris knows everything. Knows all, man.
Are you doing anything fun for your birthday?
No, we're gonna go have Mexican food for dinner with my grandkids.
Love
Love it.
it.
Love it.
That's all
Again,
you need, man. That's all you need.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It means an awful lot to both Chris and myself, and just I always go back to the fact that when you were coaching the team, and I had a chance to speak with you, and usually it was just at the Super Bowl or once a year, whatever the case was. I came away smarter for the experience. I came away as a better reporter because I learned so much about the game from talking to you and just getting a chance to spend the last 30 minutes here, kind of understanding more about football and offensive line play specifically. It's been a pleasure. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, anytime, but I would say this: that guy that's on the other end of this, Chris Hogan, is one of my favorite guys, one of my favorite players because, uh, you know, played on special teams, played wide receiver. When it got tough, he made plays for us, and to see him go from a guy that didn't play college football other than a little bit at what was the name of that school you played at? Not Penn State, the other one.
Monmouth.
There you go.
Yeah.
And but then to come in and see what he could do, and it just such a special guy and a special player and a special person, and I always special place in my heart for that guy.
Likewise, Dante. I appreciate that, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Appreciate it, Dante. Take care, and hopefully we can connect again very, very soon.
Anytime.